Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Lady Freethinker's Activist in Action interview series. I'm Nina Jackel, founder of Lady Freethinker. We're a nonprofit media organization dedicated to exposing and stopping suffering of animals, humans, and the planet. Today, we are so excited to speak with Katherine Polak. She's the head of stray animal care in Southeast Asia at For Paws, an international animal welfare organization that's committed to encouraging people to treat animals with respect, compassion, and understanding. Based in Thailand, Katherine works on promoting the welfare of stray cats and dogs through partnerships and collaborative sustainable programs. Katherine, before we get started, did I miss anything, or would you like to share a bit more on your background?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, and really excited to kind of share some of my experiences today. So you did a great job with your intro. I maybe will just add a couple things to kind of put this all into perspective. And so I'm a veterinarian, originally from the US, and I'm actually a boarded specialist in shelter medicine. So I've always had a passion for serving underserved animals, and in the US, it was very clear to me that that was those at risk for euthanasia in shelters. And so I focused very much on, population level medicine and spay neuter. I actually did my shelter medicine residency at the University of Florida, and it was during that time I started doing some consulting work throughout Asia. And I was really shocked, I would to say the least, at the level of animal suffering and really just the lack of resources, the lack of training. And I just felt compelled to help. And so after finishing my residency in Florida, I moved to Southeast Asia. I tried my best to learn Thai language, and the rest is history. So just never came back.
Oh, that's a really bold move, but it sounds like you're doing a lot of good over there and they really need you. So for those who aren't familiar with your organization, can you please share more about For Paws and what its areas of focus are?
Sure. So, For Paws, we're a global animal welfare charity. We actually have our headquarters in Vienna, Austria, but we have offices around the world in 15 countries, including one in Boston and closer to me in Bangkok. So, we work on a variety of animal welfare issues ranging from farm animal welfare, the keeping of wild animals, as well as companion animals. So,
Mhm.
in regards to stray animal care, we have big vet teams in Eastern Europe. So, we have a big team in Bulgaria, in Romania, and Ukraine doing a lot of spay neuter work. Um, For Paws is rather new for companion animals in Southeast Asia. And so that's when I was brought on to really develop that program and to figure out what our identity would be and how we would work. And so for the last couple of years, I've been very busy setting up partnership programs in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, where we focus on working with local charities to promote veterinary training, spay neuter, rescue, education. But a lot of what my time is spent now is working on our campaigns with the dog and cat meat trade. So it's a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know our readers are really concerned with the dog and cat meat trade, in Asia and other countries around the world. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Specifically, what is the situation for the cats and dogs there?
Yeah, no, it's another good question. And so obviously the animal welfare issues depend on the country, right? So animal welfare issues in Thailand do, differ somewhat from the issues, let's say, in Vietnam, but there are definitely some similarities. So, I mean, one of the major issues and kind of underlying issues is that the region is rabies endemic, right? So there's that public health risk. And so that means that stray dogs are often mistreated. There's often government culling, particularly we see that in Myanmar, and particularly we have strychnine baiting, which is, a really horrific poisoning for thousands of dogs every month. But then also we have, poor veterinary training, and that really underpins a lot of the issues in the region because for the programs that I run, we can't find local vets that, have ever done a spay neuter surgery. We see in Cambodia, for instance, well, in many of the vet schools actually throughout the region, veterinarians are trained in livestock practice. They're trained in animals and economic importance, not in cats and dogs. So veterinarians graduate without ever having touched a cat or a dog. And so then that trickles down, right? Because there's very little responsible pet ownership. That notion hasn't really, caught on. There's no veterinary services, there's no spay neuter. And so then you kind of understand why the animal abandonment is such an issue. And so we see that rife throughout the region, particularly in Buddhist countries where there's a misconception that if I don't want my animal, I can dump it at a temple because the monks will take care of it. But the sad reality is that the monks normally don't take care of the animals. They might give some extra food, but that's where the level of care ends. So there's a lot of rampant suffering. And so, kind of the way that we really got involved in the dog and cat meat trade was we were working with these partnership programs throughout Southeast Asia. And what we were finding is that the animals were going missing constantly. Like we would do a spay neuter clinic and we'd go back and the animals are gone. And we would, ask around and people would tell us, oh, well, people took them for the meat trade. So really, it was an argument for Paws that like this is an issue we need to work on because we simply can't. You can't say you're working on stray animal care issues and then ignore this kind of white elephant in the room. And I think it does often get ignored. I think it makes people feel uncomfortable. They think it's a cultural issue. They think, oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I should be talking about this. But let's talk about it from a public health perspective, from an animal welfare perspective. Like we need to be talking about this. And so I manage our investigations. So we do investigations Vietnam, Indonesia. We're a member of the Dog Meat Free Indonesia Coalition, and certainly in Cambodia as well. And so what we've found, I mean, it's heart wrenching. I mean, it's the cruelty involved. It's horrific, and certainly I'm sure you and your followers already know about it. So I'll spare you the gory details. We're also busy doing a lot of market research studies because we really feel like if you're going to talk about this issue, we need to do it in an intelligent way, and we need to understand like the trade, and we need to understand public motivations, why people are eating it, when they're eating it, and most importantly, how do we get them to not eat it, to recognize that this is an animal welfare and public health issue. And so there's been a lot of successes, but what we're finding in some countries, I'll use Cambodia as an instance again, we're seeing actually the escalating trade. We're seeing restaurants open. We're seeing, businesses and consumers reporting that, yeah, this is definitely on the rise. And so that's really concerning for us. So hopefully that provides you with a long-winded answer as to what our involvement is in the region.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's good to see that you're focusing on those areas. You see these improvements happening in South Korea, and everyone thinks, so dog meat's going away, and the reality is that it's really not. And the fact that it's increasing just means that we need to keep speaking out and keep working to help the dogs. So, thank you for doing that. And beyond your current role with For Paws, you've been involved in animal activism for many years. What are some of your most memorable or moving experiences?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to share one from my work with For Paws, if that's okay, because it happened just last week. And so maybe that's why also it's very moving for me in the moment because it literally just happened. And so, but really in my career in animal welfare, this is one of the hallmarks for me. So we, as I mentioned, have been investigating the dog meat trade, throughout the region, but specifically in Cambodia since December. Because again, we just didn't know. And so we started asking around, and it's one of those things that when you just scratch the surface, it's like this extensive, massive trade and trafficking routes and slaughterhouses, and you're just shocked at the gross magnitude of it all and the suffering, of course, of these animals. And so we had met with the owner of a slaughterhouse that was outside of Phnom Penh, the capital city. And he was killing anywhere between 4 to 6 dogs a day. So we think about 2,000 dogs a year. And again, it doesn't sound like a lot, like, oh, 4 to 6 dogs a day. But when you scale it up and you realize how many of these places are, I mean, it's a trade in the millions essentially. And so we had met with Mr. Kiev, this owner, and he was desperate to get out of the dog meat trade. He was shamed by his community, shamed by his family. And I think it's very easy to, I'm certainly not suggesting that we sympathize with those that are involved because it's a vile and it's a brutal trade. In this particular case, he really reached out for help. And really because of his, economic situation, and poverty is severe and endemic in Cambodia. And so you kind of understand when people need to feed their families. And so again, not justifying the cruelty and whatnot, but was very helpful setting up our investigations. He set up focus groups for us to interview members of the community and the trade, and was just very forthcoming and propose an alternative business plan to us that he had thought for himself, involving, the purchase of a nearby rice field, vegetable cultivation, and also selling water from a deep water well, which is actually can be quite profitable in rural Cambodia. And so just last week on the 27th of October, we were able to, purchase this property, sign over the land deed to him. So it was a huge win for him and his family, and the community came out really in support. So we don't talk about the human element involved in this issue often. But then we also had the opportunity to rescue all of these dogs that were, waiting imminent death in a pretty brutal fashion. And what was really cool about it was that there are two dogs in particular, which just makes the story a bit interesting, that he had kept in the meat slaughterhouse, in the cage, where they were watching dogs get slaughtered every day. Every time that cage door would open, this is all they knew. So he had put these dogs in as puppies, and they'd been in there for almost 3 years. And the reason he did that was because when he put the dogs in as puppies, the business started booming in his mind. Like, the business started doing really well. And so he attributed them almost like good luck charms. And so these dogs, which we later named Andy and Boomer, this is their whole, perception of the world is slaughtering, and is every time that cage door opens, they're going to maybe get grabbed and stabbed in the throat and put in a boiling pot of water. So it's really interesting. So we rescued these dogs. They're with our partner charity, Animal Rescue Cambodia. And what's really touching is they're already learning to trust and forgive humans. And I think a lot of them are still scared. Don't get me wrong. But it's such a true testament to a dog, and to how this trade is the ultimate betrayal of a companion animal, one that we've bred for companionship and love and affection, and they play such a close role, not only with us personally as pets, but in society, and that this is how we treat them. Like, this is what's happening to them. And so I'm really excited to go back next week. I'll be in Phnom Penh next week to see the dogs and to see how they're doing, and hopefully we can prepare them for international adoption. So for me, what a win. What a win for the campaign, for promoting this within Cambodia, for promoting this person as a spokesperson for dogs, who ultimately loves dogs. And it was interesting when he's taking the dogs out of the cage, helping us during the rescue, really lovingly crying, really crying, so emotional, saying goodbye to the dogs, apologizing for all that he's done, but then also to be able to take care of these dogs. So for me, it was like a once in a lifetime experience. I would say it's very easy sometimes for us to really chastise it and to really ignore the human element, but if we don't address the human element of why any of these animal welfare issues are happening, then it's really hard to be effective in our campaign. So I would just like to throw that out as an example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And oh, wow. I mean, I can only imagine how amazing that must have felt to finally bring freedom to these dogs, and, to save thousands more. I mean, that's just incredible. And I'm sure it must feel amazing to do it. And, you have the gratitude of so many animals, humans. Just what a beautiful thing to witness. So I'm so happy that you were able to achieve that. And
Yeah.
and I agree about that human element, because, it's the human that's hurting the animal, and there's always a reason behind it, whether it's a good reason or a bad reason. So you do have to address that always. So fantastic work. And
Yeah, great.
um, so for my last question, I just love to know what's in store for you and for Paws moving forward, and what's the best way for people to follow your work?
Yeah, so there's a lot coming up, is what I'll say. This is very much the beginning. So just last week, For Paws, we launched an international campaign focused on the dog and cat meat trade in Southeast Asia. And I know what maybe you might be thinking, oh, not another dog and cat meat trade. Is that what the campaign is? That what the world needs? But what I would say is yes, this is what the issue needs, because the issue needs investment. The issue needs government support. Yeah, and without that, it's really hard to move these issues forward, right? So we see ourselves in a supporting role to government, because that's ultimately who is responsible for addressing this, even if just from a public health standpoint. We are not going to eradicate rabies by 2030 in Southeast Asia without addressing the dog meat trade. That just is what it is. So the time is now to stop ignoring it, to provide resources, and to also provide a bit of pressure when needed to better understanding as to why this is an issue. And so we're really looking to tackle this from several fronts. One certainly is political lobbying, that's important, but also from a tourism perspective. Like, this is an issue in that it perpetuates the spread of rabies. So it is an issue from a tourist perspective, and we know that can be a lever for change, but also from a public health perspective as well. So what I would say is to stay tuned. If you aren't familiar with the work For Paws does, go to FOUR hyphen paws.org. You could follow us on Facebook. You could follow us on Instagram. And we are running a petition, and really what the petition is certainly to lobby governments in Southeast Asia about this trade, but it's also to sign our supporters up to join us on a supporter journey. And so we have quite an extensive journey that we want to take people on to really celebrate the successes, to reveal our investigation findings, and also share certainly our rescues and our rehoming efforts, which is always, the heartwarming component. We are issuing in the next couple months a report, which again, not super sexy. People usually don't want to read a report, but it is really important because it's going to be kind of the state of the trade. Like, this is what we know is happening. Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, some other countries in Southeast Asia, because I think one of the issues is so much of what we know, it's like Chinese whispers, it's anecdotal, it's, blogs that maybe aren't necessarily founded on facts. And so here's what we know, the trafficking routes, here's what we know, the consumption, here's what we have found in our investigation. And so we want to put that out there. We also just finished up last month an investigation on the cat meat trade. And this is an issue that I think gets very little attention, particularly in the media. It's very much overshadowed by dogs. And millions of cats are suffering in a really brutal trade. We are in Vietnam, I should say specifically. We are working in central Vietnam with two partner charities to run a Cats Matter 2 program, which is offering spay neuter, it's offering education, it's trying to promote people keeping their cats inside. Because it's interesting, local Vietnamese don't even know why their cats are going missing. And they're going missing because what we've found is a massive trafficking and kind of catching operation, a cat catching operation, where these cats are traveling almost 1,000 miles to slaughterhouses and to restaurants in Hanoi, and that trade is increasing for sure. That is not a poverty-driven industry. That is a very lucrative industry where people are paying extra money. They're paying $20-$30 for this cat meat hot pot dish. This is not a poverty-driven food for consumption. And so I really feel, and there's legislation in place in Vietnam to actually address this if the Vietnamese government wanted to do that. And so a lot of opportunities, I think, a lot of low-hanging fruit still, a lot of animals to be rescued, and a lot of exciting information to come out for people to follow and to watch. So I would just ask that people join the movement and keep themselves educated as well, so they can be spokespeople for this issue as well in their home communities.
Absolutely. Great advice. And we'll post that link and social media links also below the video.
Right.
So Katherine, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We really love everything you're doing and look forward to continuing to follow your journey, seeing what's going on with the rescued dogs and the rescues to come in the future. For everyone watching, thank you for checking out this episode of Lady Freethinker's Activist in Action series. Be sure to check out our other videos in this series and stay tuned for future episodes. For more information on our organization, please visit ladyfreethinker.org, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @LadyFreethinker. Thanks for watching.